Hello viewers, today we are going to study The Cocktail Party written by T.S. Eliot. Let's look at the objectives. To know about the author T.S. Eliot and his versification. To comprehend the plot of The Cocktail Party. And to learn the features of domestic comedy and comedy of manners. Let's look at the summary. Edward and Leon Chamberlains belong to an aristocratic society and are separated after 5 years of bitter marriage. Leon leaves Edward just as they are about to host a cocktail party at the London home, which shocks Edward and leaves a command to examine himself. Later, Leon is brought back mysteriously by an unidentified guest at the party, a psychiatrist whom Edward and Leon both consult afterwards. Later, they discover their deceptive nature of cheating each other and realize that they must face the realities of life. For Celia, Edward's mistress, it is hard to digest being refused by Edward. She, with the psychiatrist's advice, moves on towards a life of greater honesty and salvation and becomes a Christian martyr in Africa. However, 2 years later, having been adjusted, the couple Edward and Leon host another cocktail party. T.S. Eliot, one of the greatest of the English critics in the 20th century, was born on 26 September 1888 at St. Louis, Missouri, in the US. His ancestors migrated from England and established themselves as flourishing merchants at Boston, New England. Eliot's grandfather established a Unitarian church and became the founder of the Washington University at St. Louis, and left behind him a number of religious writings. But Eliot's father, Henry Eliot, was neither a scholar nor a religious person, but a successful brick trade businessman. Eliot's mother was an enthusiastic social worker and a writer of caliber. Eliot adopted the technical innovation from his mother, which she had been using in her writing. Eliot was considered bright in his school at St. Louis and won a gold medal for Latin. His writing in his school days showed marked technical proficiency and a sense of humor. The poet was at Harvard at 1906 to 1910, where he pursued wide-range courses of studies in language and literature, such as German, French, and English literatures. He was keen and was interested in comparative literature. Later, he made a European tour and learnt Sanskrit and Indian philosophy. His father's sudden death put him in financial difficulties that compelled him to take up a job of a school teacher. In the year 1917, Eliot gave up teaching and worked for the foreign department of Lloyd's Bank till 1925. During this time, he wrote vigorously and fell ill with overworking. The outbreak of the First World War, his introduction to lively literary circles of London of that time, and finally his marriage to an English girl, Vivienne Haigh, in July 1950, made him settle in London and made it his home. Thus, though born an American, Eliot came to be a naturalized citizen of England. In the year 1925, Eliot left Lloyd's to join the publishing firm Faber and Faber. Here he remained for the rest of his career. Eventually, he became a director of that firm. At Faber and Faber, he was responsible for publishing the writings of significant English poets like W. H. Auden, Stephen Spender, and Ted Hughes. At this time, his reputation as a great poet grew constantly. Eliot died of emphysema in London on Jan 4, 1965. Heavy smoking affected his health and he often laid low with bronchitis and teterache. He was cremated at Golfers Green Crematorium. In accordance with Eliot's wishes, his ashes were taken to St. Michael's Church in East Cork, in the village from which his ancestors had migrated to America. Cocktail is a morality play of 20th century. One argument is that the play unveils the fall of the families by virtue of indecisiveness, in contrast to medieval morality play, which tells the audience to choose good deeds and shun the evil. The cocktail party simply plays its characters in this crucible of choice and diagnoses their indecision as a malice. Eliot makes it a point that it is difficult to take tough choices and even more difficult to face the consequences of their choices. The cocktail party was first staged in the year 1949 and was at once a great success. The success was much greater. It was staged in New York and London in the year 1950. It is a play in modern setting. The source of the cocktail party, a spiritual rebirth and symbolism, is taken from the Greek drama Achilles, written by Ephidius. The plot of Achilles was as follows. Apollo, the god of light, poetry, music, healing and prophecy, the son of Zeus and Leto, has been banished from Olympus. Apollo is condemned for a period to serve a mortal. He becomes a herdsman of Admetus, king of Perita, and finds him a just and a hospitable man. Apollo propitiates the fates to prolong the lifespan of Admetus as a reward of his righteousness. The god agrees to grant his wish, providing that someone sacrifices his dear life for the king's sake. The king appeals everyone, but in vain. No one comes forward. However, his wife, Achilles, agrees to sacrifice her life for him. The play, in fact, opens with her preparation for death. Soon after Achilles' death, before cremation of her body, Hercules, son of Zeus, arrives at the palace on his way to accomplish yet another gallant labor. Despite his grief over his wife's dismiss, Admetus does not fail to show his hospitality to Hercules. Left alone to entertain himself during the funeral, Hercules makes merry to such an extent that one of the servants can endure it no longer and discloses the true situation of Admetus. Touched by the sacred duties carried by Admetus and moved by his generous nature in such sorrowful situations. Hercules resolves to wrestle with death and restore Achilles to her husband. Hercules gets her back, but in the form of a veiled figure, and persuades Admetus to take his wife into his house. Having persuaded Admetus himself to lead her into the home, Hercules raises the veil and reveals her resurrected wife. Admetus is allowed to speak to her as much as he wishes, but she will not be able to answer him for 3 days. The length of time necessary for her to be unconsecrated to the gods beneath the earth. In the Greek drama, Achilles' character fortifies the feminine nature which dominates her male counterparts. Similarly, the weakness of the strong sex is obvious. Edward Chamberlain, the protagonist of the drama, hosts a cocktail party at the time of the opening of the play. But he is ill at ease as his wife. Eliiot Chamberlain, after inviting the guest, disappears without anyone's knowledge. Edward conceals his discontentment and tries to entertain the guests. To the queries of the guest about his wife's absence, he dodges the truth and tells them that she has gone to pay a visit to our auntie in the countryside. Among the guests, there is an unidentified man who stays purportedly, though the last number of the guest leaves the party. The guest later comes to be known to us as Sir Raleigh, a famous psychiatrist. This eccentric guest, Sir Raleigh, makes an uncanny penetration into the host state of the mind and has an apparent knowledge of his secret. Sir Raleigh talks to Edward and even promises him that he will bring Leon back to him. That quite confuses Edward. Meantime, it is known to us that Celia, mistress of Edward, who had an affair with him and awaiting an opportunity to marry him. The absence of Leon gives him a chance to come together. But after Leon's disappearance, Edward ruminates over his wife and decides to give up Celia. He realizes that his heart longs for Leon and desperately wants her back. He starts believing that without her, his life is meaningless. At this juncture, to Edward's surprise, the next day, Alex, Celia, and Peter visit him and say that they have been sent telegrams by Leon to visit Edward's house as she comes there. Sir Raleigh at this point dramatically brings Leon home. After exchanging pleasantries, she astonishes everyone by disclosing that she has not sent telegrams to anyone. Soon the guest departed. Being alone, the couple's decision turns into an argument. Leon accuses Edward for his lack of sense of humor. On the other side, Edward blames her for making use of him and his career as a source of public background to her life as a successful mistress of ceremonies. The blaming and counter-blaming of each other end up with the decision to meet the psychiatrist. To meet their maladjustments, they prefer to meet Sir Raleigh. Sir Raleigh, the psychiatrist, being aware of their predicament, makes arrangements to meet Edward and Leon and Celia in separate rooms. First, he speaks with Edward, who discloses his condition of nervous breakdown and constant haunting of sense of his own insignificance. Moreover, of late, he becomes indecisive and ceases to believe in his own personality, despite the fact that Edward is a capable person. Sir Raleigh realizes that he is troubled by his sense of his own inescapable mediocrity of spirit and guilt that he can neither love nor be loved by anyone adequately. Leon joins Edward in Sir Raleigh's presence. After initial broking and finding fault with each other, Leon confesses to Sir Raleigh her clandestine flirtation with Peter Quip, another frequent cocktail party guest. Their own follies and their very sense of inadequacy are brought to their notice by the psychiatrist. After much confabulation and counsel, Sir Raleigh is able to convince the couple to resume their marriage. After understanding their own shortcomings, the couple comes to peace and resumes their marriage. The final words of the doctor before they depart are, "Go in peace and work out your own salvation with diligence." Later, Celia comes in to see Sir Raleigh. She confesses to him about her affair with Edward. First, she feels a sense of loneliness and then a sense of sin. She thinks she has loved Edward, but soon realizes that it is in her illusion. She thinks she has loved Edward, but soon realizes that it is in her illusion. She realizes that she and Edward have made use of each other for their own purpose, taking advantage of each other's miserable and pathetic state of life. At this juncture, with advice of the doctor, Celia decides to go on a long journey to an unknown destination with faith, courage, and determination. She leaves for the sanatorium, which can transform anyone completely. After enjoying a period of 2 years of tranquil married life, Edward and Leon conduct a cocktail party. The choice they have made 2 years back has changed their lives entirely. But Alex, who joins the party, gives a rude shock to everyone by saying that Celia was killed violently in Naya, where she offers her services on behalf of the missionaries. Despite some characters shocked on hearing the news, most accept her death as natural, perhaps even noble, as she died a saint and martyr. A domestic comedy deals with the marital life of commonplace couple and their private life. The cocktail party is called a domestic comedy, for its main plot is concerned with the family life of the Chamberlains. The play is a dramatization of the way the family life disintegrates, and it sets forth suggestions about how to have a happy domestic life. With routine characters, the action moves on, domestic errands that appears in everyone's life. The audience go over in the memory lanes about his or her old days. A domestic comedy is essentially a play of the middle classes as a distinguished form of comedy of manners, which deals with the fashionable upper classes. Cocktail Party is a domestic comedy of the action is laid in the modern London city and in the flat of the Chamberlains, not in some remote far-off place. Though the characters bear the whiff of aristocratic middle-class style, they mirror an average family. Their experience, their joy, their sufferings are those of ordinary men and women. A comedy of manners is essentially a drawing room comedy, for it mirrors the social life and etiquettes of the fashionable upper class. It is characterized by ample wit and humor and involves ordinary peril. Some are witty, while others are bores and fops. Love intrigues and counter-intrigues play an important part and form the base of the plot. The main plot of the Cocktail Party bears close resemblance to a comedy of manners. The play begins with a silly party hosted by the Chamberlains, but the disappearance of the very host makes the party absurd and mysterious. The Chamberlains and the other characters are the members of the aristocratic circle of London. Alex is a conventional bore, over-helpful and interfering. Their drawing room demeanour is precise and they speak the act in the character. The setting is urban and the story faithfully mirrors the ennui, the boredom and the many frustrations of life in the contemporary wasteland. Language and content along with the means of communication are the problems of poetic drama. But Eliot, these problems are handled well by him. As far as its diction and versifications are concerned, the Cocktail Party is a great success. The verse is flexible, close to the rhythms of daily conversation, and its language is the language of daily use. A combination of long lines and short lines with any number of unstressed syllables are liberally used in another play, The Murder in the Cathedral by Eliot. And even in some lines, there are 4 unstressed lines. Alliteration is also liberally used, like in Old English verse. By repeating phrases and sentences, he creates an incantatory effect whose rhythm is close to the speech. He used the same pattern in all his dramas and improved it so well that it became difficult to say whether there is any verse at all in the play. The play is an important landmark in the history of the poetic drama of the 20th century. Thank you, viewers. I hope you have enjoyed this session on The Cocktail Party written by T.S. Eliot. We have studied in detail the background of the drama, the plot, and about the author. In the next session, we will look at the different characters the author has dealt with. Thank you and see you in the next session.